Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started. We have a lot to cover today, so we're going to go ahead and start. My name is Patricia Lozano, and I am the Executive Director of Early Edge California. I want to welcome you all to our webinar today. This webinar will provide a brief introduction on how to support dual language learners during COVID through distance learning. We have two amazing experts with us today who will present information and share with you different strategies and ideas on how to work with dual language learners. We have Dr. Carola Oliva Olson, who is an associate professor at the California State University Channel Islands, and she's a nationally recognized expert in dual language learners learning and development. We also have Ana Arambula, who is a lead instructor at the California State University Channel Islands, and also an expert in dual language learning. So I want to welcome you all. I see people from a lot of different parts of California. You will have a chance to ask questions at the end via the chat or the Q&A. You will all receive a copy of the presentation after the webinar, and you will also get a certificate of attendance. With that, I want to introduce and let Carola begin the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia. So as you know, if there's anyone in the state of California who works diligently to defend the rights of children and families who are super diverse, that is Patricia. And we are so fortunate to have been able to work with her, collaborate with her and her team to offer these recommendations through these webinars in these difficult times. We're extremely honored and delighted to be here with you today. As you know, not only is she working on behalf of children and families in our state, but she also advocates for all of you, teachers and providers, for their well-being, compensation, access to high quality college degrees and professional training. So thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you to the entire Early Edge California team. Well, we're here today to, again, continue this work on applying the PULSE strategies and practices that we introduced in the last webinars in ways that support interactions with children who are dual language learners and during these challenging times. So we introduced these strategies throughout, and as I shared, they were developed by dual language experts like Dr. Linda Espinosa, Whit Hayslip, Elizabeth Magruder, and myself. And these strategies are fit in the context of different learning settings, different scenarios in different learning settings. So for example, where you have teachers who speak the languages of the children, and in situations where the teachers are monolingual English speakers, or they speak other languages, but not the languages of the children who are in their care at the time. So the goal for the strategies is to make learning accessible to children, and so that they have effective participation in the daily interactions, activities that are planned for or spontaneously happen, right? This is our third webinar. We are honored and thrilled to share with you more recommendations, and we are going to focus now on bilingualism, dual language learning, and the kinds of supports that we can provide during these times.
As we mentioned in our last webinar, 60% of our young children are learning more than one language. That is the majority of the children. We are living a very challenging time, and we are again experiencing a transition which is yet not very clear. And that implies many different things for each one of us. And therefore, it is very important that we focus on the emotional health of our children, their families, and also our own emotional well-being. Knowing that the majority of the children are dual language learners means that we can take the time to support each child and their family individually, create those connections, build stronger relationships, and take the time to talk about things that we usually don't address or that are hard when we are on the go. And so being connected via phone, web meetings, text messaging, FaceTime, these are optimal opportunities for us to continue to support them and implement essential practices that allow us and all children and ourselves to engage in deep conversations related to bilingualism and dual language learning and language overall, right? The entire language development of our young children, which we know is foundational. And our short and long-term goal is for our families to speak in their home language with their children, enhancing the quality of their dialogue, engaging in storybook conversations, and address with us any potential concerns that they might have about their child losing their home language or not learning English well. And so our recommendations today will focus on how to engage with families around the concepts of dual language learning.
So we should start by all being aware, right, and recognizing all the incredible benefits and advantages of being bilingual. Neuroscience clearly shows that children have the capacity to learn more than one language, and that by doing so, this will not harm or impede their development, their learning, nor their development. It's actually all the opposite. It will help. A strong foundation in the home language will help learn English better. What this means is that learning more than one language will help children develop metacognitive awareness, which means the ability to reflect on your own knowledge. So in terms of children's social emotional development, the home language is the window to their identity and sense of self in relation to their families and their culture. They want to feel accepted, and they want to feel that they're competent speakers in their language. They want to feel that they're cool, right? Many times siblings, older siblings experience concern or lack of confidence in speaking to others the same age in that home language, but will speak with someone much younger in the home language. So there are different things that we can talk about in terms of the social emotional development of children who are dual language learners. But one important aspect is that the affective filter plays a very important role at this age, because it either promotes or prevents learning. And the affective filter, you can think of it as a mesh that either is opening up, and so through the larger holes, you can receive the learning and participate. And when the tighter it is, then that is very difficult to flow through and happen. And that's the same when children are anxious, they're nervous, they don't feel that they are connected or that their language is supported, their culture is respected, and they're trying to figure out why that is so. That might affect the affective filter and close it up. And that's what we want to prevent. So in order to do so, we want to address their home language. We want to make it an explicit part of the curriculum of the learning experiences. So as children are thinking about what's happening, what they're exposed to and what they're not exposed to, they're drawing conclusions. And you might have seen many cases where children all of a sudden say, I don't want to speak my home language anymore. So in order for this not to happen, we want to build positive experiences, ensure that children feel celebrated, acknowledged, and that all of that through providing a very strong social emotional foundation related to culture and language. Bilingualism is also important for families to feel connected, to be able to communicate with each other. And we say that being able to do so is a fundamental principle for a sense of belonging, care, and healthy development. And we use the term universal language of love, right? That families communicate in the language that they feel most at ease. So we want to foster that and make sure that we address some of those myths and misconceptions that people have and that families hear about and then affect and really make families decide not to continue speaking their home language. This also relates to children with disabilities, that the research shows that children with disabilities can successfully learn a new or a second language.
Thank you. And so the first recommendation that we are going to offer to you today is sharing with families the importance of bilingualism. Children who are dual language learners come to us with rich, varied backgrounds, set of skills and cultural ways of knowing. They need teachers who welcome them and recognize their unique abilities, what they know and what they need to learn. And the exposure, the opportunity to use each language and community attitudes toward languages other than English significantly influence the rate and pattern of development in each language. And in order to foster these emotional, social and emotional relationships with infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, it's very important that we understand that what we say and what we don't say really directly impacts their learning. Therefore, we must talk about bilingualism intentionally. And bilingualism is something that the state values significantly. That is why we continue to do the work that we do in supporting children's home language. And so this book that you see here on your screen, The Cow That Went Oink, it's such a rich book. It's a story about how the cow is laughed about because he speaks a different language, right? And so through friendship and determination, they turn this situation around, and it ends on a high note where the cow who says oink, says oink, and everybody makes fun, right, of the cow because she's using a language that is not the appropriate one for a cow. She's saying oink instead of moo. And at the end, it ends in a very beautiful note that they were all, they all begin to value each other, and the cow becomes bilingual, and so does the pig, right? And so the pig learns how to say moo, the cow, we started by saying oink, and so it ends on a really nice note, and that is something that we want to say, right? We want children to be able to hear and speak other languages, and some of you might have children in your own programs where when you use a different language other than English, they might say to you things such as, talk right, why do you talk weird, talk like me? And so that's why it's very important that we continue to celebrate and honor their home languages. And if we speak them, utilizing them throughout the day in our programs to support bilingualism and relaying that message to our families is so important. And so here we have an activity that can be shared with families. And this is just an example to start the conversation regarding the benefits of bilingualism. It's a letter from a teacher to a parent where she's expressing the interest in bilingualism and what she's going to be doing in her classroom to support bilingualism through the use of this book, and reaching out to families. How can you come and support your home language in our classroom through reading stories, through engaging in small group activities, doing many different activities that they can do in our classroom. And the takeaway is we honor and we want to be bilingual, we honor your language, and most of all, parents want their child to be successful in school, and when we can support their home language, that just takes it all to a different level.
So we found this beautiful book, Little You, and we wanted to focus on and share with you the importance of not assuming anything in terms of a child's cultural background. So instead of thinking that we know, maybe because we know the language that is spoken at home, instead that we ask families to help us in identifying books in their home language that represent their culture. This one we were able to find in English and another language. We think it's a native language in Canada, but we're not sure. We don't speak the language, but we wanted to show it as an example that many times we might find other languages, but not the one that we are particularly looking for, and that there are other things that we can do when that's the case. Just like we could either cover, have families to help us translate, or have the families retell the story in their own language, or narrate what they see on the pictures. The nice thing is when you have storybooks that have very little text, that obviously is much easier. And then when you have stories that have clear scenes that show a sequence, that also helps in being able to narrate what's happening in the story. But the idea of cultural background and finding storybooks that respond to the children's experiences in their home and connections with their home, one way is to look for these kinds of books in a particular language, a particular culture, make lists, and then engage in a conversation, in a web conversation where you're sharing, for example, your screen, and having families explore these with you so that you can select together sets of books that fit in that context. This is a very sweet story or storybook, and that fits very well with the emotional health vocabulary that we've been talking about in the prior seminars. So this activity is called Our Family's Journey Towards Bilingualism. And it's an activity that we used in a course that we teach at the university. And it started, actually we put it together, it started because Maddie Mendez, who's the executive director of a Migrant Head Start program in Madera, California, gave us this idea and said, why we need things that families do that stays with them so that they feel proud, but also it reminds them on a daily basis how important it is to be bilingual and to stick to this journey, because it's not an easy one. There are times and concerns that families have throughout the years that children are going through the academic programs, but are important not just for their success, right, but also for life. These activities, what our students did, and that you might take on or modify or do something similar, is they create collages with photos, poems, stories from their families, things that they can put together in a piece of cardboard and then frame, and framing it as we are a bilingual family, right? And then making it nice so that it can be placed somewhere in their home and that they can remind themselves of the project and the idea behind it. These are wonderful resources for you to use with families and your community. It doesn't just end with the families, right? The wonderful thing with these is that they're in the public domain, everyone can access, and they exist in many different languages, including Spanish, Arabic, Portuguese, Chinese, I don't know if Cantonese or Mandarin or both, Haitian Creole, and some more. I think that's it, but it's changing. So it's good for us to share with them if we need other languages, which we obviously do in California. So another resource or idea about this journey towards bilingualism is the I Am poem, which you might be very familiar with. And this is one that I did in an institute that Suri Ansari led in San Mateo County Office of Education. So I'll read it to you. I am Carola, de aquí y de allá. I am from Córdoba, donde las sierras cantan sin parar. I am from Mamá, un amor en el recuerdo. I am from Papá, a lighthouse en el mar. I am who I am, y gracias a Luna, soy mamá. It seems easy, and it can be easy, and it can be, much more complex. There are lots of links online that are available for the public domain that you can use. We have an example here, but it's also a nice one to do as a family, where instead of using I am, is we are. My family is, and you can make it just one stanza instead of a long one. But it's a beautiful, beautiful project that families can do together, or that you can do with the families synchronously at the same time.
And so in our last webinar, we shared this book, I Love Us, and I shared the book that my family and I did. And so connecting to our journey towards bilingualism with our families, you can, it's something that families can do is create a book about a family tradition, their family favorite dish that they do during different times of the year celebrations, their passions, their interests. There's so many things that families can do, and it's something that they can cherish forever. They can create their own book for each of their child, or as a family as a whole, for siblings. It's just a great and interactive and fun activity to do that everyone can cherish forever.
This is a campaign that Californians Together have been leading, and it's a wonderful resource. It's in English and Spanish, and there's video resources, things that you can print, and it's designed to share the word, help spread the word about the benefits of bilingualism and how families can access bilingual programs in elementary schools. This is now possible because of the passing of Proposition 58 that passed into law in California, allowing programs, making it easier for districts to offer bilingual education. This is wonderful because it allows children to have a route to develop biliteracy, not just bilingualism, but a strong foundation to learn to read, speak, and write in another language. And this other resource, another link that you can find, it's called Speak Your Language, and it focuses on the celebration of the power of bilingualism. And it's focused on providing support, providing guidance, resources, tip sheets, all for schools, families, and communities. And they're in so many languages. It's actually wonderful. And I've heard that you can even send your comments if you find that you need a very specific language and it is not there. So I strongly recommend that you visit and explore this one. It's also in the public domain for everyone's use.
So recommendation 2 is supporting home language virtually. And recommendation 1, it was more about around supporting the importance of bilingualism with families, which is foundational. And how do we do this virtually? And we shared with you some ideas, and we are going to be sharing with you some other ideas today to help become more familiar with conversations that establish a strong relationship with families and an opportunity to start a more personal dialogue about their hopes and their dreams for their child's success in school and in life, which we know is so important. And so this is the tool, the Family Language and Culture Interview. It's an interview that can be used to learn more about the cultures, the languages, the skills, the talents, the goals that families have for their child. And it's an opportunity to strengthen those relationships. As we know, the relationships is the foundation for all learning. And so we know that the age group that we work with, it's fundamental. And the times that we are living right now, it gives us an opportunity to learn more about and understand the children's past experiences with language, can help us build upon those experiences and support their optimal progress. We can learn a great deal of information about the family's dominant language, who they engage in conversations with at home, using those languages, the goals that the families have for their child, building those relationships upon arrivals and departures within our programs, and now even virtually given our current situation. So what does that look like? Depends on which platform families feel most comfortable with. It can be via Zoom call, via FaceTime, via text, a phone call. And so it's pivotal now more than ever that we continue to build these relationships with children and families to support their emotional health while supporting their language and cultural background as well.
And just want to quickly share that is one of the key POL strategies. So it's the foundational, the essential to begin providing a comprehensive, cohesive model to support children who are dual language learners. So POL starts with this process of building a relationship with families and learning about the child's linguistic and cultural background. And you can find it in the two books that I think this one we shared last time, and also in the pre-K guidelines, the preschool guidelines from the California Department of Education. So we have, these are two different books, right? But the two books have a similar plot. They both have, it's all about a mouse, the mouse who ate the moon, and this one, Paco, is a mouse who wants to go to the moon. And sometimes we find that books are not available in multiple languages. So what do we do when that's the case? One idea is, of course, what we shared earlier, that we can translate, or we can ask someone who speaks that language to help us with that. Some programs have reading circles where they invite volunteers and parents, if they're available on a given day of the week, to share the stories, walk through the stories, but in the home language. But in this case, where we're reading to the children mostly virtually, or engaging in the story reading efforts with families virtually, one thing that we can do is to preview the home language in the home language, introduce the concepts and the words in the home language first, and then read the other story separately at another given time in English. Because they're related, a lot of the words are used in both, and it allows the child to start by comprehending what the story is about, learning new words that then transfer, because all that doesn't have to be relearned. What we're learning here are the new terms for the same words, basically. So this is, what it does is when we do this, that we preview in the home language, we are bridging the languages for comprehension and to help with the learning of the words. So I'll give you just a quick walkthrough. This is Paco, and it's from Paula Carballera y Blanca Barrio. And it's a really sweet story about Paco, who's the raton, the mouse, and who wants to go to the moon, and the whole experience as he or she arrives, or it arrives in the moon. And then the other one, The Mouse Who Ate the Moon, is by Peter Horacek. I don't know how to pronounce the name properly, I'm thinking. And it's again a mouse looking and admiring the moon and the story that comes along. Now, what you can do is videotape or to send, so it can be read at a different time, or it can be done synchronously, right? Where we are with the children at the same time through the web platform. And what's important is that the reason also we show you both languages is that we want children to continue developing their home language. We want to make sure that they understand the benefits of bilingualism and that their families support it and see themselves as a family who are bilingual, but also that they have a chance to continue developing English language skills. We don't want that to stop while they are in their homes. Okay, here we go.
Thank you, Carola. And so some books, as the example that Dr. Carola just shared with us, aren't available in the same languages, but this book, We Have a Plan, is. And so this is a great book that has repetitive phrases. In our last webinar, we shared the importance of selecting books that have repetitive phrases, singing songs and chants throughout the day, the use of gestures, which make those vocabulary words, those songs come alive and so much rich is so important. And the beauty of books is that you can recreate your own story if you like. Invite the children to retell it to you. After reading this book to my 4-year-old niece, I asked her to help me create a song. And so we talked about that also in our previous webinar, how we can continue to invite children to help us come up with fun songs based on books that we're reading to them. And this song that she created was based on one of her favorite songs that she likes to sing at her school, to the tune of Going on a Bear Hunt. And so we just made it fun and engaging, and we enjoyed it. And so this is something that we'll share with you as well at the end of the webinar if you want to share with your families. And then we also have this other book, Rosie's Walk. And it's again available in English and Spanish. And even if you need it in another language, you know, as Dr. Carola mentioned, we can do our own translation. And if we don't speak that language, reaching out to a colleague, someone who does speak it to support us, doing it using different platforms, virtually, pre-recording of us reading the book, or somebody else that we've asked to, a friend, a volunteer, and really just sharing a list of words and concepts that highlight some of those concepts that you want families to support at home with their child is so important to promote and engage that back and forth dialogue that we want. We want to be able to allow children to conversate with us. And so that gives us an opportunity. The use of storybooks gives us an opportunity to do that in a beautiful way.
So how can we share with families, how can we help families engage in conversations and dialogue with their children with joy and mutual interest? There's numerous studies actually that started with Dr. Whitehurst that looked at dialogic reading strategies with families who spoke many different languages, including, I think, Cantonese, Korean, Hmong, Portuguese, English, and Spanish. And the goal of this practice is for the family members to engage in a conversation, a dialogue, and to keep it going. And that it's highlighting maybe new words, practicing those words, and helping the child formulate longer phrases and eventually sentences, right? So one easy way that this was developed was following the car. So follow the car. And the idea is that the F stands for following the child's lead. So seeing what the child's interest is. If you're showing a story in particular, and you see that the child is pointing to something or mentions something, asks a question, or even smiles at something. It might not even be verbal. Maybe it's something where there's a movement of a hand, someone, and the child mimics that. So that's what we teach families, to pay attention, to observe the child and follow that interest, particular interest. And that what we do then is we make a comment, any kind of comment. And then we wait. Waiting is the hardest part, as we all know, because we want to say more and we want the child to repeat and answer all our questions. But it's about learning how to wait, to taking it slow, and then asking questions and giving the child more time to respond, to say something. If the child doesn't say something and is more interested in flipping the page, then you follow the child's lead and you continue. It's like you're weaving or you're knitting something through that, in that moment, based on what's happening right there. And at the end, we allow the child to say something, we respond, but we add always a little bit more. And again, it cycles back, right? We're constantly following the child's lead, but giving the child time to think about what was said and find the words to answer the question or make a comment or frame a response. So dialogic reading for families and that research really gives us something that you can help families with as they engage in conversations. And the one thing I would say, that we mentioned it before, and I think in one of your questions last time it was addressed, that it's about supporting families even when they don't feel comfortable reading the story. They're lost in the words, they can't read proficiently. So it's narrating or maybe describing the pictures. It's a dialogue that is not based on a script. This is a lovely story, a visitor for Bear, and this story is not available in all languages, but again, we found that it's wonderful to still have children experience these stories because of the content and how much children enjoy them. So what we do is encourage you to find the parts of a story, the sequences that you can note, maybe put a tag, a post-it, and frame with a much lesser number of pages that demonstrate the sequences, the plot, and how it gets resolved. And just show those pages instead of the entire story.
And so again, these are two different books that are again available in English and Spanish, but as Dr. Carola just mentioned, even when books aren't available in the languages that we need that are represented by our children and families, we can be creative and make up our own stories, allow children to retell the stories. And again, it's not necessarily important to read the entire book. Instead, select a few pages that you want to focus on. Once you've tabbed them, maybe you've asked someone to help you with the translation because you're going to be recording yourself and sharing that recording with families virtually, given our current situation, and just making it fun. And the books that we're sharing with you today are around supporting children's emotional health, which is something that we know is pivotal during this time that we're living in. And so these are two great books that help support those concepts. And then in this book, Don't Worry Little Crab, again, coming up with your fun and engaging songs, inviting children, if you have access to them, maybe you can invite family members to help you come up with a fun song. But this is another fun, creative song that my 4-year-old niece helped me create. after reading her this book. And I have to say, you know, it's so much fun. And when you're able to do it as a family, it just makes the experience so much richer. And so those concepts, the song will forever be embedded in this case, in my 4-year-old little niece, where now she comes over to my house and she wants to read this book and she's singing the song. So it's definitely a great experience, an opportunity for us to just really connect with families and children doing the books. And so the song is to the tune of Baby Shark. So don't worry, little crab, do 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 do. Don't worry, little crab, do 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 do. Don't worry, little crab, do 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 do. Don't worry, little crab, and then it goes on. But these were just some words that are rich in vocabulary that, you know, that she selected, and so it's just so much powerful when it has such a significant meaning to someone.
And it's building on the emotional health and vocabulary, right? So it's about not worrying, feeling safe, and also bringing in sophisticated words like enormous.
Yeah.
So this is another wonderful storybook. We couldn't find it in any other language, but it is quite tender, it's sweet. You might be familiar with it. It's called I Love It When You Smile. And it focuses on the attachment of the child, the support from the mother to the child, and to the kangaroo, really, but it's in connotation with our families and what the children are experiencing. And when you're not feeling too great and you don't know where that's coming from, but it's very expressive. The illustrations really capture the sentiment of the part of the focus of the story. And when we also want to build children's English language skills. So using storybooks in English is important, and depending on the level of within the continuum of English language development, we might not want to share the entire story. Maybe it's even looking at what we see in one page, at the illustration and what's happening. Okay. So having fun bridging languages. We love this part because there's so much talk, so much discussion about, oh, can we translate? Is that okay? What do we do when we're teaching into languages? And what about now, virtually? Is it okay now? Or how do we support it? And it's very important that we think about it not as code switching and the terms that I will address now, but really as bridging, bringing it together. That, first of all, code switching is a strength. Children are able to put together two different or more than two systems and make it work. If they're saying something like, my daughter always say this when she would say, I'm tosing. Toser means to cough in Spanish, but the conjugation, ing, is right, the verb conjugated in English. And so in order to, not knowing the exact word, the vocabulary in English or in Spanish when they're speaking one or the other, or any other language, right? They're making it work to express themselves and get their point across. So that's pretty amazing, quite sophisticated development. Do we have, let's see the story. You can show it so that, there you go.
So it's a good night, everyone. And again, this story is available both in English and Spanish, but if it's not, we can, use our resources to translate whatever we want to translate for our children. And again, the takeaway, as Dr. Carola mentioned, code switching is not a sign of confusion or delay. it's a sign of sophistication. You know, when children are able to use two languages, it's perfectly normal. And so code switching is the reflection of cognitive and communicative competence. Even with children code switch, they maintain the rules of grammar both in their languages, and so it's clear they're able to keep those languages separate. And even before babies are born, their brains distinguish and separate these two languages, which is something that is phenomenal. It's amazing. And an example of code switching would be something like what Dr. Carola just mentioned, you know, with her daughter. And so it's just amazing. And so again, this book that you see here, Runaway Bunny, is a rich book that is also available in Hmong, in Spanish, and in English. And so as we know with different languages, they're same, but they're different, right? The beginning and the ending of it. And so keeping those things in mind when we are selecting books and just dialoguing with the children is key. And knowing that if the child, it's okay for the child to use any language or to code switch during the reading of a story or conversation. It's just us, the adults, you know, we have to be the models in whatever language we are going to be reading the book in, and not doing that translation where we're reading one sentence in English and then we're saying it in Spanish. We want to be able to read a book entirely with intentionality in that one language, and then at another time read it in that different language to the children.
Thank you, Anna. That's so well said. And it's so important to also know that children will respond and use the repertoire of words and expressions that they've learned so far. And that makes complete sense. It's natural. And it's a wonderful way of being part of the conversation. So that should be always accepted. It gives us information about what words they lack in each of the languages to provide at a different time. The other part is that we can illustrate, make highlights of the word differences, of the differences between these languages and the things that are similar. It makes it interesting. We talk about it, we put it at the table. We're not, it shouldn't be such separation where, oh, this is not something that we should ever discuss. Or the opposite. It makes it it makes us curious, more curious about each of the languages that our children speak. So this is another example. This book exists in 100 languages. It's wonderful. It's Am I Small? It's a group, we'll send the information, but that has a few more books, not too many, but that are translated in 100 or more languages. And this, even if you can look at the 3 different languages, look how different. One, English has 3 words, the other one has a lot more. Then in Spanish, we have 2, but we also have you know, the interrogation mark in 2 places. The other one has all these different marks. I mean, there's so much to think about. Which one's longer, which is smaller? How do we pronounce? They all have letters. Are they the same? What about their alphabets? What can we learn about that? And there's so many interesting things to think about. And just like making things present, available, and to be discussed and shared as an interesting facts. The Talk, Read, and Sing campaign from the First 5 California, which we all know by heart because it has the cutest and sweetest song that you can always remember. Also, it's important to be explicit and remind families as we're giving them resources from this campaign to do so, to talk, read, and sing in their home language. Many times we share the information in the home language, but the families tell us that they felt that that was so that they could understand what to do, but that it was meant to engage with their children in English. So this distinction, we want to clarify from the get-go, and the more we can say, the less it's up to the families to figure out. And we have come to the time for you to ask questions.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Carola. And this is very, very useful information. We have a few questions already, but people can add. We have around like 8 minutes to go over them. So hopefully we'll get through some of the questions. So the first question is, I have always believed in encouraging parents to teach their children in their home language. I have gotten some pushback from multiple families that they won't learn English and they are not comfortable with teaching in English at home. How do we bridge this support?
With teaching English at home or teaching the home language at home?
They said that they won't learn English and they're not comfortable with teaching English at home. Mm-hmm.
So let's see if I'm understanding. So they're teaching in the program, they're teaching the home language and English, and the families don't want to support English at home?
Yeah, they're basically getting pushback on doing home language at home because parents are afraid of
the home language.
English. Yes, that's what
the other way around. So it's very important for families to know, first of all, the benefits, the reason, the rationale as to why we want them to continue learning their home language, and that experience has to be a strong one, a robust one, so that the language skills in the home language are of high quality and a high level, right? The strongest that they can be. And then while we're supporting the home language in the classroom, it depends on the model that you're using, right? Are you teaching in a home language and in English equally if you're in preschool? Or are you supporting it gradually introducing English with infants and toddlers? So depending on that setting and the model, then I would say different things, but it's also the law if you're attending a Head Start program. The program says that you must support the home language and introduce English and support English language development in the program.
Great. So I have a question. Is the family language interview available in other languages?
So we have different programs who have translated them. We are, that's something that we want to continue developing. I know that Educare in Silicon Valley has it in Vietnamese. What about Anna? I know you have it in other language.
Here in Fresno, we have it in Hmong. So we have it.
So we have it in Hmong, Spanish, Vietnamese, and hopefully we'll continue building a bank of different translations.
Great. Here's another one. What about when the child refuses to speak to the home language and wants to communicate in English only? Happens to all of us.
These are great questions. And it's something to address with a family. Mm-hmm. What are the family goals? What are the program goals? What are the concerns of the family? What is the exposure like, and the messaging that the child is receiving in the entire ecosystem? We have to think about what's happening in the classroom or family childcare home. What are the messages the child is receiving outside in their home and with extended family and the community, and see how we can build a plan, create a plan that addresses in a comprehensive way how to make the importance of the home language real to the child, mm-hmm. while supporting with things that are interesting and books that are that they can be that just build and expand the world as they understand it, and not be a limited something that they just don't admire or even understand why the use of the home language. So it's really building a sound and coherent plan to change how the child sees and understands bilingualism, and not as a thesis that you're presenting, right? It's not. It's a living experience. So all the activities that we shared here, right, Anna, would help with that.
Great. So what is better to read the book in 2 languages at the same time, translating as you go, or reading the whole book in 1 language at a time?
It would be reading the entire book in 1 language, because if you do it where you're reading a sentence and then you're reading a sentence in English and then you're reading it in Spanish, you're translating, and that's what we don't want to do. We want to be able to be very intentional in reading that story in that language that you've selected, and then at a later time doing it in that other language. And it can look the same now virtually, right? Where you might be having a Zoom call with your children on Mondays and you're going to read that book in 1 language, and then the next time you have another call, you do it in another language. That's the overall goal of supporting language.
And I'd like to add, Patricia, from the other question, that there's a comment there. What do you do when you have a family where an older sibling only speaks English? Or you have a blended family and all of a sudden, there are different members of the family who are less exposed to the language or the home language or one of the languages. It could be even a few were very well versed in Mixteco, but now all of a sudden in this new family, as that's not the same. And how do you respect each other and support bilingualism? And I think that's a family plan. And that's the role of us in helping figure that out and support families in navigating that journey. It's not an easy response, and it's not a one size fit all. It is really looking at each family's goals and concerns or challenges or strengths, and finding out a plan that fits them with everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for one more. We have like 1 minute left. And this one, it's also about siblings. So I'm going to read it. It says, we're reluctant to put older siblings in the role of translator in our brick and mortar classrooms. During virtual learning, we're seeing more siblings in the role of facilitator, not only due to proficiency in English, but due to proficiency in tech. What's your feeling on the appropriateness of older children as support in this manner?
I think my point is, children are not doing much. So if a sibling is participating, there's several things to say about that. One is you're giving a role to the sibling. The sibling is feeling as a help and supporter. And that means a lot. If you think about the emotional health of a family and being all together and supporting each other, that's important. The other part is they're hearing about all of these things that you are teaching and the importance of bilingualism, the storybooks, and even if the sibling is in high school, the sibling would learn together with a child. So I see a lot of benefits. Now, if this is taking the child away from, the sibling away from school time that they're doing in Zoom, that wouldn't be great, right? That we would all agree is not good. That wouldn't be good. Mm-hmm. But we can frame it in a way where we highlight and elevate the sibling for the kind of work and so the kind of support they're providing for the child and the family. And that's important because, again, what we don't say, at the end, it doesn't become a learning or an awareness, versus if we mention that and we continue to mention it, I mean, how proud will those two children feel? Both the child who's participating that you're aiming the session for and the one who's supporting it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, it's time, and we sadly have to end our webinar, but hopefully we can you know, send with the content that we're going to send. Some more questions will be answered, and we'll do future webinars. I want to thank Ana and Carola for all their time and dedication, and for all of you for joining us today. And we'll keep you posted on, you know, future webinars. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Adios.
Yeah.